Whistleblowers need the press for disclosures to reach a wide audience. The press relies on whistleblowers to report on issues that the state seeks to hide. Meanwhile, the government insists that all of these are unauthorized disclosures, prosecuting whistleblowers and, in recent years, increasingly intimidating journalists and news organizations. Ed, did you wake up one morning and decide you were going to be a whistleblower?
I don't think it was quite that dramatic. It was, it's a long process. People like to imagine there's a Rubicon moment. It's really more of a slow burn. Because if you are coming forward as a whistleblower and going, the public needs to know, and once they know, everything will be better. Unicorns and rainbows and sunshine from here on out. You're on the weirder side of that weirdo spectrum, right? That's unfortunately just not how the world works. That's not how politics work. That's not how people work, right? What I think is proper and appropriate to be upset about, to be concerned about, to think is a thing of real public concern, is the legacy of impunity that these disclosures, in many cases, produce. The customer of all of these executive spy agencies, the CIA, the NSA, is not the public. They don't say we serve the public. They say we serve the president. They say we serve the executive branch. We inform executive decision makers so they can provide or sort of carry out the best quality decisions. Ask yourself if you think the current White House is making the best quality decisions, no matter what information is available to them. But that's the basic premise of it. So here's the thing. If governments, and I think all governments are likely to do this, continue to break the rules, if they continue to act toward their political self-interest at the expense of the public interest, or there's even a perception that they will, because the appearance is as important as the reality when it comes to human behavior, that people are going to continue to come forward.
We hope that you have some questions and we'd be glad to answer some. Does anyone have any questions?
My name's Mike Wendell, and I had a similar circumstance happen to me. I'm a whistleblower, and I had documents, and I have a half a dozen confidential informants. The name of the town is Ellenville, New York. And I've been trying to get my information in front of the Attorney General, Mr. Eric Schneiderman, for 5 years. Is there any way you would look at the environmental injustice in Ellenville?
I've spoken to folks in our office.
Many times, and I've sued New York State. Would you look at Ellenville?
We have looked and we are looking.
And you'll work with Mr. John Faso, Congressman Faso.
I appreciate if you ask the questions that relates to the filmmakers and not to try to distract.
So what you should do is call here.
Well,
call Kingston, right there.
Yes.
Okay? And
well, my biggest concerns are the health and safety, welfare of the constituents.
Absolutely. So what is the pollution?
The pollution is radioactive materials, tritium, strontium.
From where? What's the source of that?
The Channel Masters that
the
originated in
former
Ellenville.
TV firm.
It was former military.
Yeah.
It was legacy waste.
Has
from
DEC,
the DSM. The
has
DSM is.
Has DEC or any agency like that ever?
They're all aware of it.
Quantified this?
They're all aware of it. Okay. It's a long story, but it's legacy waste from 1939.
Chris Gibson had a file on this. Let me. I will ask with that information. I'll ask the staff to tell me to look into this thing. Especially, I want to see if there's a DEC component here.
There is.
Okay.
I promise.
And all right.
Thank you very much.
Well, I certainly want to find out. These things are hard. You got to have a regulatory agency that has gotten involved.
Well, it's the Department of Energy. They have all the materials that we see. Chris tried to get to the Department of Energy and get these certain items from them.
Yeah.
And they just passed the buck.
All right. Let me see what I can do.
I mean, Chris Gibson would have had the same. He would have clued you in on all this stuff.
Well, you know, we had a lot of things that that he was working on, that we worked on. Some of our staff is the same. So
Right.
I think the staff will be able to tell me how far Chris got, and I'll see if I can pick it up from there.
George Christian, I think his
George
name is.
Christian.
He knows all about it.
All
We
right.
were going to do a disease registry. 2 years ago, I tried to get it for Chris Gibson. He said if I got the disease registry, he would take it to Washington, and he didn't care how many billions of dollars to clean it up. He would get it done.
Those are hard to do.
He
I got to
needed the
run because
media.
I'm doing my
I know
town
it.
hall.
I know it.
All right.
I
Good.
look forward
All
to
right.
seeing you again in
Be
the
back.
future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
We have a situation in the town of Worthing in Ulster County where there are approximately 30 homes over the New York City aqueduct that is leaking badly. Now, New York City denies that the water coming up into their homes is a result of the leaking aqueduct. We know that it is.
Whistleblowing is not something that needs to be disincentivized anymore. The deck is already stacked against them. But when these exceptional sort of events occur, how does anybody hear about it? And it doesn't happen without journalists.
It's not just the water, it's the ground, it's the earth, it's everywhere. And if I can prevent or save somebody or just make somebody aware that it's around, so maybe they can make the conscious decision to leave the area if they want. You know, I mean, if I would have known what I know now, you know, when I was pregnant with Jackson, I probably wouldn't have moved.
New York City also has a potentially devastating problem with its drinking water infrastructure. That water comes to New York by way of a system of aqueducts that carry it from lakes and rivers more than 100 miles away. The aqueducts are mostly underground.
You have maybe the best water supply system for any city anywhere on the planet. It's not pumped, it just flows naturally by gravity from its origins under the Hudson River south into the city of New York. But eventually it's going to begin to decline and begin even to fall apart.
The Delaware Aqueduct is leaking massively.
The loss of those 36 million gallons is not regarded too seriously by the recipients of the water, by the government of New York City.
The Delaware Aqueduct was built in the 1930s and 40s and rushed into service during World War II, when high-grade materials were scarce. During construction, groundwater seeped so heavily into the section under Wawarsing that engineers had to line the aqueduct with steel and seal it with concrete.
The tunnel went through a limestone fault at that spot, and it's not surprising that now we're faced with leakage. We know for certain that some water reaches the surface. How much of an impact that has on the individual properties, I mean, we're anxious to find that out.
Much of the leaking water appears to be bubbling to the surface in Wawarsing, New York.
There's more money on the way for some residents living in the town of Wawarsing. The New York City Department of Environmental Protection announced this Friday more than $12 million have been earmarked to help those impacted by the leaking Delaware Aqueduct. $7 million will go toward expanding the Napanook Water District to include 275 more homes. Another $5.5 million is being set aside to fix the homes of local residents damaged by years of flooding from an underground concrete tunnel which supplies roughly half of New York City's drinking water.
It wasn't briefed to the Congress. Our representatives didn't hear about it in the way that they're supposed to. Instead, only a very select group of what's called the Gang of Eight heard about it. These are the most senior members of the House and the Senate. One from both the Democrat Party, the Republican Party, and the one from each of the intelligence committees of both of those groups in Congress. So they're substituting the judgment of 8 people for the public's representatives, which are 535 people. And, you know, they only brief it out years later, bits by bit after this, and they don't tell them the whole story. They lie about it. You know, the whole thing is just it's a crisis of democracy.
Okay, it is December 22nd, 2016 at 3:30. I'm here with Michael Wendell. I'm under Sheriff Freer conducting an internal investigation.
Please.
I was remiss in stating for the record that there's another person in the room with us who's videotaping this
film
conversation. So
documentary.
that's all. I just forgot to put that on the record. We're just here to gather the facts so I can do my investigation.
The whole thing comes down to the New York City aqueduct being cross-contaminated.
What's it contaminated with?
Trichloroethylene, benzene.
Trichloroethylene and benzene. And where'd that come from?
It came from a place called Channel Masters.
Out of the big plant down there
That they're-
in Ellenville.
That is correct.
Village Ellenville, yeah.
Right here is evidence that 9,100 gallons per minute comes into the New York City aqueduct.
Mhm.
This is the New York City aqueduct. And if you want to read with me, what does that say?
It says water inflow in gallons per minute.
And how many gallons per minute is it right here?
9,100.
And that groundwater contaminated flowing into the New York City aqueduct after every severe rain event. This is what the whole...
Yeah, but it can't get into the aqueduct here. It's got to
The
go into the
aqueduct
reservoir
is
first.
cracked 500 feet
I know it's leaking.
in Lime Rock. When they turn the water off here because of flooding events, all of the tritium, strontium-90, and uranium goes into the New York City aqueduct.
And the intelligence services said, no, not this person, they know too much.
Public opinion is the biggest driver of everything.
The court of public opinion, you mean, is the highest court in the land.
You know, there's 8 million people down in, over 8 million, 8.5 million, I think now, New York City people. Why don't you go get on one of these investigative reporters, you know, what was it, CBS or NBC? They have these investigative reporters. They put that on the air, and if 8 million people read that their water's no good, I think they'd be upset.
By having a source partner with journalists, even an extraordinarily large volume of an extraordinarily sensitive amount of material could be provided. The public could learn from it, and that we could mitigate not just real harms, right, but theoretical potential harms. And whenever you see the next leak come, and surely it will, and sooner than we think, hopefully larger than we expect.
Mr. Rice out.